Usually when people talk about the dark night of the soul, it is talked about as the singular thing that could happen to you once in your path to enlightenment. And that is certainly possible, I'm sure. But at least for me, and I suspect many other people, another phenomenon happens where there are multiple dark nights that you have to go through on your way to absolute nirvana and moksha. And the way I think of this, metaphorically speaking, as an analogy, is that we are going deeper and deeper with our spiritual practice over the years, and that is like digging a hole in the ground. We are digging for treasure, or perhaps digging a well for the fountain of youth, for this beautiful, wonderful fountain of eternal life. We are digging for all these beautiful treasures, but every now and then we stumble across, you could say, a pocket of high pressure oil, and when we hit that, it spurts oil everywhere, which is of course very heavy, unenjoyable karma that makes us feel sticky, unclear-headed, really foggy in the mind. It makes us feel sad, depressed, perhaps even, and I think a dark night is a good way to refer to that experience. And as we are digging, we're going deeper and deeper, and you may find that you're going to go through some sort of a dark night a few times in your life. So it can be very good, I think, to know what to do in those circumstances. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about that today. But I will say, if you're using psychedelics, that is particularly prone to inducing these dark nights, because psychedelics in a way are very explosive. They take you to all sorts of states of consciousness that can be very beautiful. You can go very deep, we can say, with a psychedelic, but at the same time, because you're going so deep so quickly, you can hit oil wells quite easily. Okay, so ultimately, if we are hitting an oil well of karma, negative heavy karma, we want to, of course, clean up the oil spill. And the way in which we do this is, whether we like this or not, you perhaps already know the answer, but we should reinforce it. It's to love as deeply as we can. Love the oil, because what that does is it evaporates the stickiness, the oil, and with that comes a lightness and a cleanness. Okay? So that is what we're going to be doing ultimately to clean up this oil, is to love as deeply as we can. And what I recommend doing is, when we find moments of clarity, which can be difficult in this sticky, oily state, but when we find moments of clarity, we feel deeply, fully feel the pain and suffering and heaviness. Really, truly deeply feel it, love it as much as possible, and perhaps if you've got a practice like this in your life, feel as much love simultaneously as you are feeling these very heavy emotions. So if perhaps you're going through loneliness, then you fully feel the loneliness, but at the same time you can think of something that makes you feel very loving in spirit. And that might be, for you, it could be many things. It could be a particular mantra, or it could be a vision of Christ or a vision of white light. It could be something as simple as feeling the loneliness at the same time as hanging out with your dog, and that dog loves you unconditionally. So you feel the loneliness and the love from your dog at the same time, because by feeling the love of the dog, the love is seeping into the loneliness, and that over time boils away the oil and leaves you cleaner and fresher and closer to enlightenment and nirvana than ever before. Okay? So that is the long-term process that we want to go through. For me, my favorite practice to do this is the 8 spiritual breaths. It is extremely effective, very powerful. And if you are in a dark night of the soul right now and you don't have a way to access love, then perhaps that is something that you can look at to help you with your healing process. But that is very important for me to say, that we will need to clear up this oil, this explosion perhaps of negative karma, through loving it deeply, letting the love soak in deeply, because that is the ultimate solution. But today, I more so wanted to make this video for the immediate predicament that you are in, perhaps, if you are going through a dark night of the soul, because this cleaning up process of letting love seep in that takes time. It could take weeks or even a couple of months because it just doesn't happen overnight. If it happens overnight, great, but we might go through stages of our life that a really big oil spill happens that needs a lot of scrubbing, a lot of love to seep in. But the predicament that you might have at this moment in time is, although you know what to do for the coming future to clean up this oil, how are you going to function tomorrow, in the next week, in the next couple of weeks and months? Perhaps you have a job and you've got all this stickiness, unpleasantness, heaviness, but you need to function in life, do what needs doing, be productive, perhaps look after a family or whatever it is that you do, you need to function. So how can we just clear the air to a level that we can function well enough? And today, all I can do is share what works for me. You can try the things I'm going to list, and if they work for you, great. If they don't, then you can try other things. Perhaps this can just be a little bit of an inspiration for you. Now, if you're going through a really heavy dark night, the first thing that I would suggest is that it is ethical to take a sick day, or maybe if you really need it, you can even take 2 sick days from work. Because, of course, sick days are meant for physical illnesses, but a dark night of the soul, it's as bad as being sick. You could call it a karmic sickness or an energy sickness, and it's a sickness because we can heal it, we can cure it, and we need some time for that. So I think, first of all, it can be ethical to take a day or two of a sick day, and in that day, what can we do now to heal ourselves just to an extent that we can function in life? Perhaps we can't clear up all the oil, but we can scrub it off ourselves for the time being so that we can function and so that we can deal with the oil a bit later during the day, during the evening. So let's imagine you're on a sick day, or you've perhaps been a bit lucky and now it's the weekend and you've got a day to do some exercises or some techniques or something to clear up this oil to some extent. Because tomorrow you're going to have a busy day at work. Now, one thing that I've found always works to me on quite a deep level even, so I recommend doing this in almost any case. Perhaps it's just me, but I know for a lot of other yogis, they also like doing similar things. It is to engage with fire. Now, of course, do this in a very responsible way. Don't let the fire accidentally spread and burn your house down or burn a forest down. But if you can, if you've got a fire pit perhaps, you can literally get some paper together, perhaps a bit of wood, just something that burns quickly, and make a fire. And you can even talk to the fire, express all your heaviness to the fire, your emotions to the fire. Just let the fire soak into your consciousness. And it sounds a bit abstract and mystical why that would work, but to me it really genuinely every time makes a noticeable difference in my energy levels. And perhaps to go back to a metaphor, the fire, if we engage with it, it could also help boil away this oil, at least boil it off ourselves. And if you're a symbolic person, you can even take these ashes and rub them on your forehead or on your body, because it's interesting, in the very olden times, before proper soap had been invented, ash can be a very good soap, because what a soap does is it scrubs away oil, because molecularly it attaches to both oil and water. But interestingly enough, so does ash. So you can think of it symbolically. You're first of all burning your karma, perhaps, which is like evaporating this oil. But then afterwards you can take the ash, and that will attach to the oil and to water. And then after you've put the ash on you, you can take a shower and wash away as much as you can of the stickiness, heaviness that you might be experiencing. And another nice, interesting fact about ash is, of course, as many people know, it is a very good fertilizer. And many places in Africa, which is where I'm sort of from, a lot of times the cycle of rebirth is sparked by a fire, and then the ashes fertilize the soil, and then new sprouts can come up from that energy. Okay, so Of course, it might be possible for you to have one fire ceremony and heal all your karma. I'm not particularly suggesting that will be the case. What I'm more suggesting is that this can be a good tool to clear the karma off yourself. For the time being, it will give you some level of healing, some level of cleansing. But then don't forget, ultimately, we want to be deeply feeling the heaviness as well, so that we can let the love seep into that deep of a level. Now, that's one thing I've already mentioned you can express as you're making this fire. Express your emotions to the fire. But also, it can be good to express that to other living beings. Perhaps you could express it to your dog or even a tree. But it can be really good if you've got a deep friend that can understand what you're saying, to express it to a friend, because a lot of the times we just need to get things off our chest. Perhaps we feel like the karma that we're going through is a bit almost insane or shameful, or we feel guilty that we feel this way, or whatever it might be. If you can express that to a really good friend, it can be good to get it off our chest so that we don't have this sense of bottling it up. But at the same time, I will encourage you to not over-express and go on and on and on, because we don't want to burden anyone else with our heavy karma. We express it once, get it off our chest, and then hopefully that helps as much as possible. Now, something else that I know helps for many other people, and including myself, is to clean the house. Perhaps if you're going through a dark night, it could be natural that your house is in a bit of a messy state with clothes lying everywhere. So it can be a good place to start, to pick everything up, put them in their correct place. But even if your house is already clean, or if you've done the basic putting everything in its place, it can be nice to get a wet cloth and clean all the strange nooks and crannies of the house. Like, for instance, if you take a wet cloth and go at the top of a door, you'll see there's tons of dirt at the top of a door. Okay, now you don't really need to clean the top of a door because no one ever sees it. But at least for me, I really like the process because symbolically it's like cleaning the nooks and crannies of your mind. So you can go in the toilet and really clean behind the toilet where you barely ever clean. Or you can go in the kitchen and find a nook and cranny behind the kettle. Clean these odd spots. And as you are cleaning, you can sort of engage with your heaviness, your heavy feelings. And I think on a really effective level for me and for many other people, this simple act can give you a bit of freshness. Again, I'm not claiming that cleaning the house is going to be some miracle solution that will make you drop your deepest feelings of loneliness, but it can make you feel fresh enough that the oil is just temporarily, to a noticeable extent, brushed off of you, washed off of you, so that you can function the next day, perhaps at work, because we all need to function. And then that can give us some space to later come back and let love seep in to these very deep levels. And that way, later on, we can release our loneliness to the deepest of levels. Okay? Now, something else as well that I highly recommend, if you can do it, or even if you can't, you can just try it anyway and learn a new skill, is to create some form of art. Art can be a fantastic way to express what you're going through. And in particular, if you can be creating something that causes you to cry, that is really beautiful, because crying is almost always, to me at least, a sign of catharsis and a sign of releasing. And actually, I will end this video through a little arts project I made, I think more than a year ago now, which was about loneliness. And that was a really beautiful experience for me, because as I was making it and looking back at this little video I made with some music and basic visuals, it really brought tears to my eyes and made me feel like what I was doing fully expressed what I was going through, and that brings a sense of understanding and closure to what's happening. It's not all confusion. It makes sense, the emotion that you're going through, on a level that words can't describe. So if you're at all artistic, if you can paint or sing even, whatever it might be that you like engaging with artistically, you can use that skill to express your emotions. And if you can make that emotional and even bring up tears, that is absolutely perfect for bringing about even quite deep shifts and deep cleansing of this oil karma that has been released in such a big extent to your life. Okay? Now, something else as well that can bring a lot of immediate change in one's consciousness is to do something physical that perhaps for me, for instance, it is swimming in the ocean, especially if there's waves. I actually like tumbling in the waves. If you like surfing, that would be even better because first of all, it engages the physical body and there is a slight risk of drowning. You need to sort of be aware of what's going on. So that makes you feel alive once again and truly engage with something outside the emotions. But also, again, being in the water has this cleansing effect, I find, especially if you're being tumbled around. But also at other times, I just like going for a run to get the heart pumping, to perhaps feel some exhaustion in one's physical body. That, again, can help with releasing this temporary heaviness that let's say sometimes this oily, sticky karma is attached to the eyes. It's like making you grimace. But physical exercise, I find, can help release at least that aspect of it. And also, if we're sweating, perhaps you can even go to a sauna if you don't want to run too much. Then you can go to a sauna and really sweat things out. And people say, I'm not sure if this is a scientific or medical fact, but if you go to a sauna and sweat, it releases toxins. And at least on some level, you can imagine that sweating things out is going to release some of this heavy karma that we are carrying around, at least to an extent that will allow us to function the next day. Okay? Now, again, I want to say all of this are sort of suggestions that have worked for me. And when people are going through a dark night of the soul, we want to be healing this to the deepest level, but that can take time. And all the techniques, the little techniques I've mentioned here, first of all, they can help provide direction because sometimes the confusion in the mind, at least for me, can be so overwhelming. It can be useful to just have some sort of guidance for our energies to follow. And everything I mentioned here, it's not going to solve your heaviness perhaps to the deepest level, but even if each of the exercises can remove 5% of the oil, that is going to be a great way to start because perhaps if you do all the exercises, that might get rid of half of the sticky oiliness, and then you can really deeply feel into the rest of the sticky oiliness later on to fully release it to its deepest of levels, okay? So I don't want to be overconfident in what I'm saying, but I think it's definitely worth a go if you're going through Dark Night of the Soul to try these things. Perhaps if you have been through one already, you can share with us as well in the comments what really worked for you. I can keep that in mind next time a big piece of karma gets released for me, a big oil well of karma. But then also, I want to say two things to end that are a bit more motivational in nature. The first, although it can be hard to accept for us as we're going through a dark night, is to trust and have faith that your emotional state will return to normal. You will be happy again in the future, even though you feel really, really bad at this time in life. If you've been through a couple of dark nights of the soul in the past, some phases of really heaviness, then you could perhaps even remember that and acknowledge that it was very difficult, but you did pass through it. And you can remember again and have faith that in time you will once again be truly, deeply, very, very happy, and your spiritual process will reveal fountains of water, clean, pure, beautiful water of youth, and it will reveal gems so beautiful and deep that we can't even imagine it. So that can be good to acknowledge that and have faith that our emotional state will shift into deep, deep, deep beauty in the future if we can pass through this difficult phase of life. And then finally, a piece of motivation that I almost always find very motivating is that the hero of any story, of any great epic, of any journey that is difficult and tribulous, the true hero of that story is not the man standing at the top of the mountain waving a flag of victory. That's a very nice moment when you're wagging the flag of victory. But the true hero of the story is the person that finds strength to take one step forward during the toughest, heaviest of moments.